All right, Nick, let's talk about the Cincinnati Bengals. I think the Bengals definitely, the season has not gone the way they want it to be. There's been a lot of disappointment, but there's a lot of bright spots on as the players go for this team. It's just the coaching, the front office, that has been the problem. We did a story a few weeks ago talking about Zach Taylor. Maybe he's on the hot seat. And now there's some more corroborating evidence as to why that still may be true. But before we get into that, I'm Andrew, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, Nick, as I alluded to, Zach Taylor on the hot seat. There is more evidence that has come out just alluding to that is the case for the Cincinnati Bengals. Let's get into the article and we can talk more about it on the other side. This is from over on Stripe Hype. It says a recent report from ESPN's Jeremy Fowler, very reputable source, a great reporter from ESPN, suggests that there is some speculation within the league regarding Taylor's future in Cincinnati. And it certainly sounds like there would be some interested parties if Taylor is ultimately relieved of his duties. He said this is the time of year when people are trying to figure out which rumors are true and which surprise job will open. For example, I've had multiple coaches in the league text me this week about the Bengals job, wondering if Zach Taylor is on the hot seat. Obviously, this wouldn't happen if people didn't think it was going to or should happen. So I think that's something for the Bengals to think about. Before we get to your thoughts on this, Nick, I want to ask Bengals fans in the comment section below. We're talking about head coach here. I want to know, who do you think the next head coach of this Bengals team should be? And I'll preface it this way. Do you think it should still be Zach Taylor? If so, let us know why in the comment section below. And if you don't think it should be Zach Taylor, who do you think could want to come over to this Bengals team to be the next head coach? Give us your thoughts in the comment section below. But nonetheless, Nick, what do you think about this news for the Bengals?
Yeah, so I've got two thoughts on this. First and foremost, right? Anytime you're in the leadership of an organization, especially an NFL franchise, and you're having people inquire about the potential opening that hasn't happened yet, that hasn't even been publicly advertised, that's an indication that the guy who's in that position isn't doing such a good job, right? And the fact that other people outside your organization think he should be relieved of his duties, right? You've got Zach Taylor is still currently the head coach. There is no really hardcore confirmed reports that he's on his last legs. There's some rumors and rumblings, but nothing really set in stone yet. And despite that, we've got this report from Jeremy Fowler, who, like you mentioned, he's a very reputable source. He's a great reporter, one of the few great guys at ESPN who really puts in the time and effort to find good sources and good reporting. He's come out and saying there's a lot of coaches around the NFL that are thinking this is going to be a vacancy. Could they potentially apply to it? Could they become the next head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals? If you're Bengals leadership, if you're the Blackburn, you're like, okay. If you're Katie Blackburn, if you're like, okay, look, maybe we're not gonna, maybe we weren't thinking about firing Zach Taylor. Maybe we're on the fence. If all of these coaches are asking about the position, maybe Zach Taylor should not be our guy going forward, right? And that leads into point number two, and I know you've got some thoughts on this as well, is that the Bengals are obviously the most desired position if there's a head coaching vacancy in the National Football League right now. They have everything you want. They've got top flight quarterback, MVP quarterback, top flight playmaker. They've got a team that, despite the way they performed on the field this season, especially in crunch time, knows how to win. They made a Super Bowl run a few years ago. They went to the AFC title game the following season. This is a team that has the ability with the guys in the locker room to win big games, to make big runs. They just need a head coach to come in and solve some of their problems. Look, I think Lou Anarumo has had a lot of problems this year, but I think most of the blame has to fall at the top. The buck stops with the head coach, Zach Taylor, in terms of how he's managed the talent, the players, the game-to-game situations, the in-game situations, has been subpar, at least, especially when compared to the talent on the field. I think this is an indication to the Bengals leadership, to the front office, to the ownership group, that Zach Taylor is not the guy you need running this team long term. Listen to the other smart guys, the other coaches in the National Football League. If they think this position should be open, maybe you should make it open. I think this is going to happen sooner rather than later. I think before long, probably after the season, but before long, Zach Taylor will no longer be the head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah, Nick, and the point you bring up, I think, is really great about this. Why would other coaches be asking about this job? I think there's two reasons here. The easy one to look at is, yes, they think that Zach Taylor may not be the coach of the Bengals anymore. But the second, and the good news for the Bengals fans, like you allude to, is that they want to come to Cincinnati. There's a ton of interest in high level coaches because, some third tier quarterback coach isn't going to go like, hey, you think the Bengals job's available for me? That's not going to be the guy. You got some really good, promising upcoming coaches in the world that I think want to come out and prove their worth. I'm going to go out on a limb and say probably offensive minded head coaches see Joe Burrow, they see Jamar Chase, they see the potential of this offense and be like, I could really make my mark on the NFL if my first head coaching gig was with the Bengals. I think it's a really good opportunity for a lot of young coaches. You think this, obviously, they haven't named any coaches. I'm just throwing names out there that are, possible head coaching candidates. The Ben Johnsons of the world would probably love to come to Cincinnati, make their first run at a head coaching job with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. I mean, who wouldn't want to do that? So I think if you dig into this story, it doesn't have to be all bad. We know that this has been an underperforming season. We know Zach Taylor, he's made a lot of bad decisions. Even in another article talks about, his constant communication with the front office. It hasn't been there. They haven't been in lockstep, and that's on him. And so, that's inexcusable. Everyone has to be on the same page. He's got to be able to communicate, keep going. But it seems like as the season has gone on, he's been more and more out of touch with what is going on in the organization. So I think that is a thing you can take away from it. But what you really should be taking away from this story is Zach Taylor, probably they need to move on to him. I think this is a sign to the Bengals front office. But B, there's a lot of really smart, talented coaches who are trying to get ahead of the ball and saying, hey, is this job open? If it is open, I am interested. I would like to put my name on that list. And I think that in itself is some good news for the Bengals.
Yeah, absolutely. And a couple points to end on here. Remember, this is a Cincinnati team that, whether fair or not, has the reputation of being cheap. So most head coaching talent, whether they're former head coaches or up and coming guys, traditionally, if they can avoid it, don't want to go to a franchise that's cheap, right? It puts your coach in a tough position because obviously you're trying to build a culture, build a locker room, build a team together, and you got to worry about an ownership group that's not spending the money. Whether that's still the case or not with Cincinnati, that's been the reputation. Despite that reputation, there's a lot of demand. That speaks to the talent level and potential of this team that Zach Taylor has certainly failed. You're talking about an upcoming offensive mind, though. I think this is more of a defensive coordinator or defensive coach's dream. Imagine if you're Mike Vrabel, obviously connections to the state of Ohio, of course. You had your time with the Tennessee Titans, great defensive mind, great culture guy. You just were failed at the quarterback position. You come to the Cincinnati Bengals, solve the culture, help improve the defense, and let Joe Burrow do Joe Burrow things. I tell you what, I think Mike Vrabel's the name to keep an eye on here for the Cincinnati Bengals. I think there's a great chance he's a head coach of this team come 2025.